Hello everyone and welcome back to another review. Today we are talking about September 5. Honestly, a film that I had zero knowledge of until I went to my local AMC Screen Unseen the other night, which is like a mystery movie thing that they do. I was kind of hoping it was going to be either Baby Girl or Kraven the Hunter because those were the two main films that people were predicting, and even if one of those sounds way better than the other quality-wise, I think both would have at least left me with a lot to talk about. So I was a little disappointed when I learned that September 5 was in fact the movie that I'd be watching. However, I wound up being pleasantly surprised. So in case you, like me when I sat down to watch it, know very little about this film, basically it covers the hostage crisis at the 1972 Olympics in Munich, Germany, and more specifically, it focuses on an underprepared ABC sports crew who find themselves responsible for covering the tragedy. Basically, a group of Palestinian militants from the terrorist group known as Black September invaded the competition and took a bunch of Israeli hostages, both players and coaches. And it led to this massive standoff that nobody saw coming and the German police force was clearly unprepared to handle. Before saying much else, I do want to address the elephant in the room, and that is the current conflict between Israel and Palestine. I've seen a lot of aggressively negative reception towards this film because of the manner in which it's coming out during this time period where there's real-life conflicts between these two groups of people. And I'd just like to point out that, to the best of my knowledge, this was written and filmed before the war in Gaza started, so I don't think it's really fair to hold that against the film, and it's best to go in with a clean set of eyes and judge the movie as if it has nothing to do with the context of the real world. So the narrative of September 5 basically just chronicles this event from the POV of these newscasters. In fact, about 90% of the film is set in the newsroom. So you're not watching these events unfold, you're more so having them reported to you, although we do see some grainy TV footage that they're recording and broadcasting. So yes, you do see the hostages and their captors, and I'm pretty sure a lot of this footage, if not all of it, is from the real life event. So I feel like that's something that's worth pointing out. You know, if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, you might find this film disturbing. But I think it was a nice touch, and I think the movie handles it with tact. Quite honestly, if I had read a synopsis for this movie before going to see it, I think I'd be a little put off by the fact that we're not watching these events actually unfold. We're instead watching a news team figure out how to logistically cover it and figuring out what kind of ethical boundaries they may or may not have to break in order to cover this event in its entirety. That kind of story just isn't for me. I like to be in the action, seeing the characters that are involved in these specific situations. So my point is, this isn't the type of movie that would generally appeal to me. However, it's about 90 minutes long, it's fast-paced, it puts you right into the situation within like the first 20 minutes or so, and I think not knowing much about the real-life events definitely contributed to how engaged I was with this film. But I found myself to be on the edge of my seat, constantly waiting to hear about what's coming next, how they're going to overcome these hurdles because this team is very inexperienced. They're sports broadcasters, for God's sake. They're here to cover the Olympics, not some sort of insane hostage terrorist attack. In hindsight, I actually think that this is the best way to tell a story like this. The fact that we aren't able to see a reenactment of what is actually happening in this apartment where these hostages are being held. Instead, we're just seeing grainy images on a TV screen. It almost makes you feel like you're back in 1972 watching it unfold on a TV screen, which is weirdly unsettling and just as creepy as it would be if you were viewing it in person. So yeah, September 5 was a pleasant surprise for me. With that said, when the credits started rolling, I sat back and thought to myself, wait a minute. This movie was very engaging, but it didn't leave me much to chew on after watching it. I think one would at least hope that if we're going to cover this story from the journalistic point of view, the movie would at least raise some questions about the ethics of the situation. And while September 5 does dip its toes into some interesting areas that I think could be thought-provoking if they were taken farther, it never goes all in, and it often left me wanting more. There are three specific examples that I can think of that if the movie delved more into these ideas, it would have been more thought-provoking and would have left me with more to chew on and think about and ponder after the credits rolled. First of all, one of the characters points out that most of the families of these hostages will be watching the live feeds. So should they be broadcasting with the knowledge that a lot of people might watch their loved ones die on live TV? Another one is that the perps might be watching the broadcast and learning precisely what move the police are going to try next. And lastly, of course, the whole idea here is that this news team is the closest to the actual event. They have front row seats, and they want to be the ones to have the first scoop. So there's also this big question as to whether or not it's ethical to report these things that they're hearing before getting confirmation from multiple sources. Because there's a ton of misinformation in a situation like this, and the risk of being wrong is there, and it could hurt the company and these individuals negatively if that were to be the case. Throughout the movie, there are little snippets in which it addresses these three questions that I found to be very fascinating, but then it quickly course corrects and goes right back to the main streamlined story that came off as a bit superficial. Another negative, and this is one that I find in a lot of movies like this, is that there's no character to really latch onto emotionally. The performances are good, especially Ben Chaplin. He's one of the characters who is asking these ethical questions around every corner, and I think we as viewers are meant to ponder these things. I just wish the film spent more time on them. I think the film would have benefited from a bit more nuance when it comes to journalism, the role of journalism in covering events like this. Are they even contributing to a solution, or are they just looking to profit off of the suffering of others, essentially? As a whole, I think September 5 works best as a straightforward chronicle of the timeline, the events that took place at the Olympics during 1972. It's not perfect, it's not a great film. I do feel a strong lack of connection to any of the characters, and it does often stray away from, I think, its most interesting elements, which are only briefly touched on. But it's a very engaging thriller. I would recommend you watch it, especially if you don't know about what happened at the 1972 Olympics. I'm going to give September 5 3.5 stars. As always, I want to take the time to thank you guys so much for clicking on this video and watching it. I've been making movie reviews consistently for almost 2 years now. I'm having a blast doing it. I'm glad some people are enjoying my takes. As always, I encourage you to share yours down in the comments if you do see the film. Be sure to also hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll catch you all in the next one. See you later.